I never thought I would be fired from the company. I had spent 7 years helping build, not because I had made a serious mistake, not because I had failed to meet my targets, not because I had done anything wrong. I was fired because someone decided that I was no longer useful. And what happened 1 month later changed the way I looked at success, loyalty, and revenge forever. My name is Claire. For 7 years, I worked at a company called Westbridge Solutions. When I first joined, it was a small business with fewer than 20 employees. There were old computers, tiny offices, and more problems than customers. But I believed in the company. I believed in the people. Most importantly, I believed in the founder, Richard. He had interviewed me personally. During my interview, he had looked at my resume and said, "You don't have the most impressive experience, Claire, but you seem like someone who doesn't give up." I smiled. I don't. He hired me the next day. I started as an administrative assistant. I answered phones, organized meetings, prepared reports, and handled whatever needed to be done. But I didn't stay in that position for long. Whenever something went wrong, I tried to fix it. When a major client complained about delayed orders, I created a tracking system. When employees kept missing deadlines, I developed a shared schedule. When the company started losing customers, I analyzed the complaints and discovered that most of them were related to slow customer service. I presented my findings to Richard. He looked at the report and said, "How did you figure all this out?" I just listened to what the customers were saying. He smiled. "Then maybe you're in the wrong position." Within 2 years, I became operations manager. The company grew rapidly. We went from 20 employees to more than 100. Our revenue increased. Our customer base expanded. And I was proud. I wasn't just working there anymore. I felt like I was part of the company. Then Richard hired a new executive named Victor. Victor had worked for several large corporations. He wore expensive suits, drove a luxury car, and spoke with complete confidence. During his first meeting with the management team, he looked around the room and said, "This company has potential, but it's being run like a family business." I remember looking at Richard. He smiled. "That's why we hired you." At first, Victor seemed friendly. He asked me questions about our operations. He wanted to know how everything worked. I gave him detailed explanations. I showed him our systems. I shared my reports. I even gave him access to several internal processes that I had personally developed. I thought he was trying to learn. I was wrong. He was studying how to replace me. Over the next few months, things started changing. Victor began presenting my ideas as if they were his own. At a management meeting, he presented a new customer retention strategy. I stared at the presentation. It was almost identical to a proposal I had submitted 2 weeks earlier. When the meeting ended, I approached him. "Victor, that strategy looks very similar to mine." He smiled. "Great minds think alike." I knew exactly what he was doing, but I didn't want to create conflict. I went to Richard instead. I said, "Richard, I'm concerned about what's happening." He looked up from his computer. "About Victor?" "Yes. What about him?" "I've noticed he's using my work without credit." Richard sighed. "Claire, don't make this personal." "I'm not making it personal. Victor is here to help the company grow. So am I." Richard looked uncomfortable. Then he said, "Just give him some time." I left his office disappointed. A few weeks later, Victor became my direct supervisor. That was when everything changed. Suddenly, every decision I made was questioned. Every report was criticized. Every mistake, no matter how small, became a major issue. One morning, Victor called me into his office. He placed a document on the desk. "I need you to explain this." I looked at it. It was a customer complaint. One shipment had been delayed by 2 days. I said, "I already handled this." The customer received a full refund. Victor shook his head. "This should never have happened." "I agree. That's why I fixed it." He leaned back. "You seem to think fixing problems makes them acceptable." I stared at him. "That's not what I said." He smiled. "Maybe it's time we had a conversation about your future here." I walked out of his office with a strange feeling in my stomach. 3 weeks later, I received an email asking me to attend a meeting with Victor and Richard. I knew something was wrong. When I entered the conference room, Richard wouldn't look at me. Victor was holding a folder. He pushed it across the table. "Claire, we've decided to terminate your employment." I thought I had misheard him. "What?" Richard finally looked at me. "It's not personal." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "Then what is it?" Victor answered, restructuring. After 7 years? Business decisions aren't based on emotions. I looked at Richard. You agree with this? He remained silent. I felt something break inside me. I had worked weekends. I had answered calls at midnight. I had stayed during holidays. I had helped this company survive difficult years, and now they were giving me 5 minutes. I picked up the folder. Is there anything else? Victor said, please return your company property before you leave. I looked at him. You know what's interesting? He raised an eyebrow. I trained 3 people who could do your job. He didn't answer. I walked out. I cleared my desk quietly. Some coworkers looked shocked. One of them whispered, Claire, what happened? I smiled. I guess they don't need me anymore. As I walked out of the building, I expected to feel angry. Instead, I felt empty. For 7 years, I had built my identity around that company. Now, suddenly, I didn't have it. For the first week, I struggled. I woke up at the same time every morning. Then I remembered I didn't have to go anywhere. I opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I had no company emails waiting for me. I thought about calling Richard. I didn't. I thought about asking for my job back. I didn't. Instead, I started reviewing my old work. That's when I noticed something. Several systems I had created were not owned by the company. They were my personal frameworks, my templates, my analytical models, my training materials. I had created them before the company had officially adopted them. I had never thought about ownership because I trusted Richard. Now I wasn't so sure. I contacted an attorney. She reviewed my documents and said, Claire, you may have a legitimate claim here. I asked, what kind of claim? She explained that some of the systems and materials I had developed independently could not simply be treated as company property without reviewing the employment agreements and circumstances. I didn't want a lawsuit. I wanted a fresh start. So I started my own consulting business. At first, I had no clients. Then one former customer contacted me. Claire, we heard what happened. I laughed. News travels fast. They said, we need your help. I accepted. Then another client came. Then another. Within 3 weeks, I had more work than I could handle. I hired 2 former colleagues who had also left Westbridge. And then something unexpected happened. One morning, my phone rang. It was Richard. I stared at the screen. I almost didn't answer. Finally, I picked up. Hello? There was silence. Then Richard said, Claire, how are you? I'm doing well. Good. Another silence. Then he said, we need to talk. I smiled. About what? Westbridge. I leaned back in my chair. What's wrong? We've had some problems. What kind of problems? Our operations system isn't working. I almost laughed. That's strange. He didn't respond. Then he said, could you come in tomorrow? No. He sounded surprised. Why not? Because I'm busy. Claire, this is important. So was firing me. Silence. Finally, he said, I know. The next morning, another call came. This time, it was Victor. I answered. He didn't sound confident anymore. Claire, we need your help. I smiled. My help? Yes. Why? He sighed. Things have become difficult. I said nothing. He continued. The systems you created aren't functioning properly without you. I looked out the window. That's not my problem anymore. He said, we're willing to discuss compensation. I almost laughed. Victor, you told me business decisions aren't based on emotions. He was silent. Then I said, neither are mine. I hung up. 2 days later, Richard called again. This time, he wasn't asking me to return. He was begging. Claire, please. We need you. I closed my eyes. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted them to understand what they had lost. I agreed to meet Richard. Except Richard looked different. He seemed older. He stood up. Claire. I nodded. He said, I owe you an apology. He continued. He looked down. Victor convinced me that the company needed new leadership. I asked, and you believed him? Yes. Why? He sighed. Comfortable? You had been here for 7 years. I was loyal. I know that now. I looked around the office. Where's Victor? He's gone. I wasn't surprised. I shook my head. The system and kept the person who only knew how to talk about it. Richard looked embarrassed. That's exactly what happened. He pushed a contract toward me. We want you back. I looked at the number. It was almost twice my previous salary. You don't understand. I'm not coming back. His face fell. But why? Because you already showed me what you thought of me. We made a mistake. Yes. And I'm asking you to forgive us. I stood up. I forgive you. He looked relieved. Then I added. He nodded slowly. So what do you want? Smiled. I want to build something of my own. A few months later, my company became one of Westbridge's competitors. And ironically, Westbridge became one of my clients. We signed a consulting agreement. But this time, I wasn't their employee. I was their business partner. Richard respected my boundaries. He paid me fairly. It said, I wish I had realized your value before we lost you. I replied with only one sentence. Then I closed my laptop. I thought about the woman who had walked out of Westbridge 1 month earlier. She had been heartbroken. She had wondered whether she was good enough, understood that losing, sometimes rejection is just redirection. Sometimes being pushed out of a place is exactly what you need to build your own. Without realizing your value, eventually, come back and beg for your help. But by then, you've already become too valuable to go back.